How
Hello.
are you, Rebecca?
I'm good, thank you.
Huge congratulations on I feel I don't know how to describe it because it's so many things. It's kind of it's a beautiful insight into the man, to his life, to all the inspirations he had. It's kind of meditative in a way as well. It's so beautiful. Huge
Oh,
congratulations.
thank you so much. Thank you.
What started this particular journey for you? What was the kind of catalyst to go, I want to tell this man's story in my way.
Yeah, it was totally instinctive. I was sitting on a couch with my producing partner, Damon Cardesis. I said I'd like to make another documentary. He said, well, who would your ideal subject be? And really, the first name that popped into my head was Martin Scorsese.
Mm.
And I think, you know, I I had known him. uh, to some degree, not really socially that well, but I had met him a few times and he knew my work already because
Yeah.
I had asked his advice about voiceover films for Personal Velocity which was one of my films, and he gave
Mm.
me this advice. Then he had looked at the film and gave me some like feedback, and then came this time where every few years I would show him a film and he would just watch it. And so he knew my films, but we didn't really hang out or anything. And anyway, so we called, I called his the producing partner in docs,
Mm.
Margaret Bodie, and she said, and I said, I'm sure someone is doing a big film on him. And she said, no, he hasn't said yes to anyone, but let me talk to him. And so then began, he said, let her write a letter. So I wrote a letter. And then he said, let her come and talk to me. So I came and talked. And then immediately after that came the pandemic. And in that conversation where I was talking to him, he uh it sort of was like he was like, well, we could meet at this time, we could do it that time. And I was thinking as we were talking, I was like, are we doing this or what's happening? And at that time, I thought that we were making a feature film, like one film.
Yeah.
Mm. And it's funny because I talked to Brian De Palma, who's one of my first interview subjects, and he said, you can't do this in one film. And I said, oh, yes, I can. Of course I can. And then, a year later, I'm sitting there, I'm like, there's no way I can do this. And that's how it began to grow into a multi-part.
It's was he the first? I mean, you talk saying Brian was your first kind of contributor, but did you I don't know because we see all these kind of different almost like audiences with Marty that you have, in these different situations where you sit and chat to him. And I love that we hear you in it as well, because it just makes us feel like we're sat at the other side of the couch listening to you guys have a lovely conversation. It's so nice.
That's,
Did
yeah.
you did you do lots of those chats with Marty first and then kind of work out who else you wanted to and needed to talk to, or what was the kind of journey about who you would talk to outside of Martin?
It was a real back and forth. I started with Martin. I and we did about 8 hours to start with, and then I started to do other people, and I can't remember. I mean, definitely, Brian De Palma was one of the first ones that
Mm.
was within those first few months, but it was like a snaking in and out. Like we would just gradually, whenever Marty had time. In the beginning, it was easy because there was the pandemic. In the beginning of the pandemic, there was no, he had to be outside. He couldn't make films. We had to shoot
Yeah.
outside, which is why some of our shots are in this sort of nature. Um, and uh, so I would just catch him when I could. And my holy grail was his study, which is
Mhm.
what I wanted to get to. But eventually I got in there because I wanted to be in his lair,
Yeah.
I feel like it's very important. It's a really sacrosanct kind of place that it's such a privilege as a viewer to be able to be inside the space with him. And I really wanted to be there with him. But that took a while. And what I did was, early on we had a Zoom interview because that's all we could do at one of
Mm.
the interviews. We don't actually use we only use the audio from that one. But in the Zoom interview, he was so candid and so open. And I thought, well, that's very interesting. No one's in the room. So I started getting it so that like people, uh, I would have the cameras positioned and then everyone left. Like when we were in his studio, everyone
Amazing.
left. So it was really just him and me. And even though he knew that he was being photographed, there was something different about not
Mm.
having other heartbeats in the room, not having other minds in the room. And and those interviews sometimes lasted 5 hours. I mean, one day it went on so long that I said, we have to stop because I can't see you anymore. It was like, and then the other thing is that he would move and there was nobody at the camera. So some of it, like his head, his ears, so we had to do a lot of reframing later, but and like a lot of, tweaking of the light in the color correct. But it was about kind of like, for me, it was all about the intimacy of these conversations and,
Yeah.
sort of radical listening, I guess, on my part.
And I imagine as well, I mean, how much did you plan? You know, but because it feels so natural and that the kind of, the conversation takes us where it takes us. And what's lovely is the episodic nature of it in terms of, I mean, I was hungry for this. After one episode finished, I was like, another one, another one. It's kind of like it's got this addictive, brilliant nature to it that you can't put him down. It's just you want all of him sort of thing. And for you, in terms of planning and knowing what you maybe wanted, but then I imagine a lot of it was the revelation of things that he might have talked about that might have taken you in a different journey or revealed things to you or
Well, that's very true. I mean, of course, I would come in very well prepared with things I needed to ask at some.
yeah.
But when I asked them, like I would start somewhere, but Marty's mind doesn't walk in a certain in a line. You just
Mm,
can't have that kind of interview. So actually, the interviews would be extremely sinuous, and like and you didn't want to interrupt the discursion, the sort of discursive nature of it, because sometimes you would suddenly go somewhere that was so fascinating and that you would want to be in, like, 3 hours you would want to be. So you would have to, so my work was to kind of really more follow him, where follow the breadcrumbs in a way, but
yeah.
also lead back at certain
Yeah.
points. And that was like very difficult. And I have to say that, like, I wouldn't say difficult's the right word, but it was at the end of each interview, I literally couldn't remember what had happened. And I would say to the producers, what, how was it? Because I was so intently in the present that I actually forgot. I completely had there was no room in my mind for memory. So it's
Yeah.
very interesting, kind of like, I was completely listening, like, and trying to think and remember, just remember enough to kind of get the things that I felt like we needed. But like, that's part of why over a period of 5 years, we have about 20 hours of interviews with him, because it was like it wasn't a cut and dry thing where his office was like, well, he has 45 minutes. And,
Yeah.
normally what would happen with somebody like that. But he was so generous with his time. He was extremely generous, and also with himself.
Mm. It feels like you get the sense as well whilst you're watching it that he's having a really nice time and he's really enjoying the opportunity to just talk about things and address things and
Yeah.
almost have peace with certain things as well, I think.
Yes, I think so. And I think he made the decision. He somewhere along the line, he just
Mm.
decided to be honest. I mean, the truth is, this is one of the most honest filmmakers and truthful filmmakers there've ever
Mm.
been, like, in terms of
Yeah.
how he approaches his material. That's his whole thing. It's like, we felt like, he often says, we felt like we had something truthful. We felt like we have something honest. And so he gave, as another filmmaker, filmmaker to filmmaker, he gave me his honesty as well. And I think that that had to do with his whole gestalt, his whole way of being.
Yeah, and I think that we all kind of assume that he put so much of himself into his storytelling, but the films really reveal that, in terms of how much of himself and his experience and his trauma or whatever it is, he's poured into those films over the years. And you really celebrate that in the films, I think, as well.
Yeah, I wanted that thing of like, the man creates the films create the man. The films create the man. The two things really are one for him. I mean, you can't say, well, as a man, he's this way, and as a filmmaker, he's this way. I mean, this has been going on since he was 5. So it's like, his love of film, his connection to film. So there's no prying it apart. But
Mm,
that's where and that's also kind of how we found our way, which films to emphasize. It had as much to do with, can we tell that story of him within that as well?
yeah. I love I mean, there's so many parts of it that and things that were kind of like, oh, I love that about him was that, but one of them was Sharon Stone's interview where she talks about, when she got on set and she could kind of see the boys' club and
Yeah.
how she kind of how she was just really honest and she'd kind of made an assumption about what was going on. And in reality, as soon as she kind of put herself out there, she was like, it was this relationship that they built. That was so beautiful to kind of
So
hear
glad.
her talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad you got that out of it. It's very important because that was the point of that scene. It's like it's a movement of a relationship, you know?
Hmm?
It's like him saying, "Oh, okay, sure, of course." Because for him, the actors are his key collaborators, and he will give anything to those actors, you know?
Yeah. What was the kind of, not, there must have been so many moments for you that were kind of like, wow, or, you kind of taken aback by learning that or him revealing it. Are there any particularly that stick in your mind of really staying with you, either things he talked about or things he revealed or insights?
I mean, there were so many, and like I said, I've blanked out a lot of the actual moments of being
Yeah.
there. I I think, I mean, the two things that come to mind is how he talked about his spiritual life and
Yeah.
how open he was about that, and how important. I mean, I already knew that he was a Catholic filmmaker, but there was something about the depth of how he went into that and how he talked about it that I was very struck by. And also, I guess, talking about the period of in the 70s of
Mm.
sort of lost, and
Yeah.
how open he was, 70s, early 80s, in that period also, after um the king of comedy, and that
Hmm.
the sense of like you really feel like his loneliness and his really almost not being able to continue on, you really are inside of that experience. That's one of my favorite moments in the film, because you really are like, I wanted you to be with him, like fully with
Hmm.
him as a character. And I
Yeah.
was remember just being very honored by the fact that he was going there, and yeah, revisited that and was able to revisit that.
Yeah. It's really made me, I've gone back to watch some of his films from after watching the series, and it makes you watch them really differently. Like it makes you, not that they didn't mean anything, they obviously meant a hell of a lot, watching them,
Of course.
but it's almost like they've got an even deeper meaning now going back to watch his films with so many of the things that come out in your conversations with him. They've almost you've kind of, I don't know, you've kind of given them another, yeah, it's really, it's such a lovely, I think when I said for the gift idea element of it, that's what it feels like. It's like these films mean even more to me anyway now after your conversations with him about them.
Yeah, because I think also because he has been a chronicler to a degree of very male-dominated worlds. I mean, he certainly has, with Age of Innocence, or Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, or even Casino, which has this
Yeah.
magnificent female part in it. But he's known also for these tremendously male dominated films, and it's important to me that people who wouldn't have necessarily might find other portals, because
Hmm.
there's so many portals into the work,
Yeah.
there. And you don't have to already know the films, you don't have to already, I mean, of course, in terms of this audience, of course there's going to be people who are the diehard Scorsese fanatics who are immediately going to watch it, but then I'm hoping that people are just going to be curious to open this book,
Yeah.
and or to open this like door. And what you said before about the Moorishness of the episodes, like that you want to do the next one. I mean, that I have to say was one of the main things I learned, which was at first I thought this was going to be like a really long feature film, and I was just going to cut it up like a snake. And then
Yeah.
it was really Molly Thompson at Apple who's like, no, people aren't necessarily going to watch this all in one day. I mean, like it's 5 hours long. So it's like, what if you want them to, you have to make it that they want to turn the page. And so that was one
Hmm.
of the main things that we kind of like were trying to figure out, was that thing of like, how do you end an episode where it's not like who killed the girl who they found in the ditch or whatever.
Yeah.
They most
Yeah.
shows are.
Dun dun dun. Yeah. But music does that really brilliantly, actually. You know, the way that you've used music throughout the each film, but also that kind of pull through, you know, in terms of where we're going in the next episode. That's you've done that really, really brilliantly. And I wanted to talk to you about that because, you know, as a filmmaker, music clearly means a lot to you and has been such a great part of your career, you know, just kind of looking back on Maggie's Plan, one of my absolute favorites, and just that mix of that kind of the score of Michael's score, but then also that those kind of ska tracks and things that are in there as well. It's just, and then Springsteen for She Came to Me, you know, and there's, I mean, you clearly music is an important part of your storytelling. What were your what were the discussions about what you wanted to do with this, you know, with it being, you know, because music is he has a soundscape. Scorsese has a
Exactly.
soundscape.
Well, I really wanted, I mean, of course, he also talks about like one of the, important chapters is about how he uses music in that sort of great root episode where he's driving with his brother in the car and the
Mm.
brother's like is playing When My Dream Boat, and then you hear this like, and then you look and there's a bum throwing up in the street, and like a friend of his is holding his head, and he was like, the beauty and horror of that combined with listening to that
Mm.
music, and you see how that's Scorsese's way of
Yeah.
looking at music, right? That's right there, that dissonance. So it's really important to get my music in the film correct, like in terms of it's like how it clashes with what's going on, how it, or embraces and helps what's going on. Like, so I mean, for me, getting the Stones was huge. I mean, immense. It was a very important thing. And there are other, like the band, there's some wonderful
Yeah.
was music from his period. It was very important to me from each period that there's something of that flavor so you can feel it. Again, it's that thing of like being there with him. And then in terms of Michael Rohatton's work, it was like there are like two or three styles that are very specific, that are kind of laid back, and we kept kind of thinning it out. So it was actually quite cool and simple what he was doing. But yeah, it's very difficult to do that kind of
Mm.
music. I mean, like it was like, and he had 75 cues. I mean, like
Wow.
it was an immense amount of music that Michael had to compose, which you almost don't really feel. It's just pulling you through, but there's an immense amount of music because there's so much montage in the film. The film,
Yeah, an archive and all that. Yeah.
so much of it is just created scenes basically that need music.
But it's also really clever because, you know, it's that kind of fine line with music, isn't it? Where you kind of it can't overpower. You don't want it to kind of preempt how you're going to feel about something emotionally, but it's got such a strong role as well. You know, it's kind of like it's such a sometimes
Right.
it's the hardest thing to get right. And I think you do a great job of that, particularly because you cover, you know, so many years, so many subject matters, so many people, and so many films. So yeah, it's bravo.
It's true. That part of it was totally exhausting and like an immense piece of work for Michael and for all of us. Like it was like just in general, like figuring it out. And also, of course, all the technical stuff that went into like the music, the archival, all that stuff was like almost like I don't know, it was its own filmmaking process aside from just the cutting. I mean, it was immense.
Yeah. How did your, because Michael's been a long time collaborator with yours across your films. How did that relationship start in terms of you guys working together?
Well, Michael and I went out in college. We were a couple in college, and we were living together in Brooklyn, actually. When I made Angela, I know, I guess we weren't living together anymore, but when I made Angela, which was my first film, like we had
Yeah.
broken up, but we were really close friends, and he was just naturally the person that I wanted to have do it. He was a great guitar player always throughout, and he was just a great musician and a composer. So he did the score to Angela, which if anybody can hear that score, I just love that score. But anyway, and then we would just, collaborate through the years. It was like an extension of our friendship, like,
Yeah.
and I think that the feeling that we had together, you can kind of it's actually not, you can't separate it out from the music actually, because it was so
Yeah.
many discussions about tone. He's really good about tone, because tone, if there's one gift like a director needs to have, they need to understand tone. It's like the only thing you have to be able to do. Everything else, like you can learn, but I feel like that's something that you have to be able to hear tone. And he is very, very good at understanding like how to bend a scene a little bit one way or the other.
Mm. And also with something that does have a kind of like a kind of almost like a musical aesthetic or idea to it, like Maggie's Plan, where there's a kind of a genre at the heart of the needle drops, for example,
Yeah.
to have a relationship musical for his music to have a relationship with those, but for it also to have its own identity. Such a great, not an easy thing to do, but a great job in that film.
Thank you. That was Adam Horovitz actually was our sort of
Oh
musical.
wow.
He's the brother of Rachel Horowitz, who was one of the producers on the film.
Hmm.
And she said, what about Adam, Adam to come in and help us
What
find
about a Beastie
something.
Boy as a
So he came in and he said we were talking about different kinds of music maybe to use. And he said, "Well, what's your favorite music?" And I said, "Well, ska." And so then we started like thinking about that, and he had like such depth of knowledge. And I mean, getting to the bottom of some of these tracks and who owns what was like not that easy, but
yeah.
it was like it really it kind of gave this loopy, it was like that loopy beat that really went with Maggie and
Hmm.
just felt right. So that was
Yeah.
how the conversation happened.
And working with Bryce actually as well. I'm a big fan of Bryce Dessner. I think just,
Heavenly.
I mean, could he be any more brilliant at any more things musically? Do you know what I
Oh,
mean? It's
he's
just
he's
kind.
just amazing, and also he's such a lovely human being. I knew with
Oh,
the film that I needed somebody who really composed operas because I didn't want them to be like pastiche. And he was really, I mean, he's fantastic. I would love to work with him again. He's wonderful.
and how does it come about that you get Bruce Springsteen and Patty to write and record a track for your for your film? Is that just an
Well,
ask?
Bryce actually really encouraged me to, because I said like, who would be the perfect? I was like, I need somebody. This needs to be like deep Americana, where you
Yeah,
feel like it's her, but it's also this America, you know.
yeah,
And he said, and he was like, well, there's one person who that is, and he was like, that's Springsteen. And I was like, yeah, but he's not going to write me a song for this, you know. And I know Bruce a little bit, but again, like not to, say, would you write me a song? But what I did,
yeah,
I sort of like approached his reps and I said, would, and they said, well, just send him the thing and send him the film and see what happens. And I did write and I said I would love it if Patty could be on it as well.
yeah.
I thought
I
like the
love
whole kind
that.
of romance, because the film is so romantic and I thought it would be beautiful. And he said, "Well, let me watch it." I talked to Bruce and he said, "Well, let me watch it and see if anything comes to mind, whatever." And he watched it and actually I was driving back from Ohio where I dropped off my kid and I was so exhausted I couldn't get all the way to New York, so I decided to stay in a hotel. And it was the most awful hotel like I've ever been to in my life. It was just there's a guy with like white supremacist tattoos at the front desk. I mean,
Oh
the whole thing
God.
was just so bad. And I get into my room.
Lock the door.
I lock the door. I look at and I see somebody's coffee, like paper coffee cup on the porch. I'm like, ew,
Oh.
ew. So, but anyway, so I was having this awful experience when I get a call from Bruce Springsteen and Patty, who love the film. It was like it's like from low to high. I was like so happy. And so he said, let me see, let me try. And within 2 days, he had written that song. He just sat in bed and
Wow.
wrote the song.
I saw the Deliver Me From Nowhere film last week
Oh,
with
I'm so excited to see that.
it's so great. It's
Yeah.
so beautiful.
Oh, I'm so glad. I can't
Yeah.
wait. To
It's really, really touching. Um it's funny because I was lucky enough to get to chat to Mr. Scorsese about I did some stuff here in London around his films with like awards Q&As and things. The most terrifying of which was for The Irishman, where there was a panel of about, I think it's the biggest panel I've ever done, where there was 12 people, which included Marty, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino. It was crazy. Sandy Powell costumes, the best costumes
Oh,
done. It was amazing. And I was kind of like sat at the end going, what am I doing here? And then I got the chance to chat to him for the podcast, actually, for Killers of the Flower Moon. And it's one of the most memorable experiences of my life, to be honest, getting to sit and chat to him for half an hour. And I came out the room, went back into the kind of holding room for the film company, and they all sort of looked up from their laptops and went, "How was it?" And I just burst into tears, because it was such. I just felt so honored that I'd had that opportunity to hear him in such a private environment, like you say, just sat on a couch with him and
Yeah.
just hearing him talk and tell his stories. And I'm so grateful that you've had this opportunity to d really dig in with him and share this with the world. I think it's going to be a real thing for a lot of people to get this opportunity to see this film, these films that you've made.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. That was just me ranting at you. Sorry, Rebecca. It's just like
No, I love it. I feel that way too. I feel like how lucky are we that we're alive in this time, or he's alive and making films. It's almost hard to appreciate people like that while they're still alive, you know? Like
yeah,
sometimes it's hard to like, but I do feel that I got to have this experience and then to share it with everybody and that it'll be there for
yeah.
whoever wants to discover more about the films or learn about the man who made the films. And yeah, that's I'm so grateful that I had that idea. It
How,
shows it
h-
never hurts to ask.
exactly? What's the worst they can say?
Yeah,
No. Do you know what I mean? My mum always says, if you don't ask, you don't get. Um,
exactly.
I, how much do you think it has, uh, I don't know. I mean, when you move into your next project, whatever that's going to be, you're maybe there already, but how much do you think it's impacted how you go into your next project? Has it at all?
You know what? I don't yet know in a way because I'm figuring out what my next film is going to be, but I have a feeling that it will strengthen me and make me, you know, just strengthen my resolve and to be brave and to be free. I mean,
Yeah.
that's I think the final thing that he's always chasing is a feeling that he's free. And even in his business where everything is coming on down on you to say you're not free because it's
Mm,
the big corporations giving you money, there are all sorts of reasons. But you have to kind of maintain that. And like as for the rest, I mean, I feel like even making this documentary, I became quite influenced by his work. I mean, you can actually see in the cutting, in the use of music and stuff, that there's quite a lot of influence
hmm.
of his films in terms of the propulsiveness of it and stuff like that. And I think that so I really just don't know, but I do feel as though I went to grad school. I mean, I feel like because not only did I get to talk to him, I also got to watch a lot of the films that he was then talking about. So I
Yeah.
sort of expanded and expanded.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think like that I also love how supportive he is of new talent and new
Oh,
filmmakers. Yeah.
absolutely.
I was just talking to someone one day about who's working with Lynn Ramsey on her new film and just how incredible he's been through that process for her. You know, like you were saying when he said to you, "Oh, watch the film and kind of, kind of tell you, give you some
Yeah,
thoughts or notes or whatever." He's
yeah.
so generous with his time with people and
Oh, absolutely.
mentorship almost in a way as well.
Absolutely. He remembers what it was like to be trying to crash through and to try, he remembers that so keenly, I think, and understands that all the people who are trying to get their voices heard and
Mm,
and he's been so generous with me like over time and but that really is his orientation is that generosity toward other filmmakers. He's almost like a film evangelist. Like he's just both trying to preserve film and trying to keep it alive as a medium and to breathe excitement and possibility into all these people's lives. Like it's really an amazing thing.
mm. And the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I'm so excited to see Ronan's film as well. I'm seeing that I think the week after next.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah. How exciting for you as as a mum, but also seeing him on his journey, writing and directing.
It's an amazing thing to watch. It's an amazing thing to watch. And also to see the level of how hard he worked and how much of himself he put into it. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing left. And in the way that it should be. That was very
Yeah. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for your time today. Huge congratulations once again, and I very much look forward to what's next as well. So thanks for your
Thank you
time.
so much. I hope to talk to you again.
Yeah, have a great day. Thank you.